Historic Places claims that it was built in 1761, and the city says that it was a 1770s French colonial townhome. What that really means is we don't know when it was built. But the bottom line here is it was built before 1788. Now, 1788 was an important year here in New Orleans because that was the year the city burned down. We had a great fire that year. It burned down 80% of the city. Now, we lost 900 of the 1,100 buildings that were here at that time. In addition to that, we lost an unknown number of people to that specific fire. And the reason for this is that particular fire lit off just after midnight on Good Friday. Now, there were also gale force winds the day before that. And the bells were ringing on their own. The church was getting ready for their vow of silence. And they were worried about, one, the bells ringing during the vow of silence, and two, they were worried about the bells breaking. So they decided, two birds, one stone. Let's wrap those bells in burlap. No ringing during Good Friday, no breaking of the bell. This was a great idea right up until the point that the fire lit off.
Oh my God.
And those bells were also the only way we had to warn the city that there was a major fire. So when they went to go ring that bell, nothing happened. And the city burned down while everybody slept. It burned for 3 days at over 1,000 degrees. And when they were able to get back into the French Quarter to check the damage, there wasn't anything to check. There was piles of rubble and ash. Anybody who had been here had been naturally cremated. In addition to that, their wonderful idea on how to deal with that was to spread those, basically the ash and rubble and the cremated remains out. And they built the French Quarter that you see on top of it.
Oh my God.
So, to say that we are standing on one of the country's largest unconsecrated graveyards isn't even a small stretch of the imagination. Now, in addition to that, we had a major fire in 1794. Burned down 25% of the city, including the other 20% that had not burned in 1788, to the point that we only have 3 buildings in the city of New Orleans that predate 1794.
Wow.
You have Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop, you have a place called Madame John's Legacy on Dumaine, and you have the Ursuline Convent. Everything else is gone. Now, that being said, this particular place right here and where we are in the French Quarter used to be a really rough area of town. The reason for that is because this is where the pirates hung out. This section of the French Quarter backed up to what is now Basin Street was a bayou at the time, connected to Bayou St. John, which connected to the Lake Pontchartrain, which connected to the Mississippi River, which connects to the swamps. It was the way the pirates smuggled in all of their goods. So the pirates would bring in their smuggled wares, bring them to this side of the French Quarter, and then distribute them out into the city that way. So this area got to be a little rough over time. And when you see the name Lafitte everywhere, they are referring to a gentleman by the name of Jean Lafitte, who was the most famous pirate in the Gulf Coast, period, ever, end of story. And he had bases here in southern Louisiana, he had bases in Galveston, Texas, and he had bases in western Tampa. And basically, while he was here between the 1780s to the 1820s, he owned the Gulf Coast, including this city. And he actually had a warehouse in this part of town between 1800 and 1805, but unfortunately we don't know exactly where it was located. Now, that being said, one of the things we know about this building is that we do know it was associated with the pirates. Maybe not Jean Lafitte, but definitely with the pirates, because every single person who has owned land title, lease title, or building title or ownership to this particular place between 1722 and 1820 was either a known associate of pirates or a pirate themselves, i.e. that place was a smuggling den. So it comes as no surprise that almost every ghost story that comes out of that building revolves around pirates. Now, the first two, at the very front of the building, you're going to see a fireplace. And that fireplace works. It is what heats the building during the winter. And while it is on, people report seeing 2 red glowing eyes staring back at them from the fireplace. Now, on the far left-hand corner of the building, people report seeing a gentleman sitting behind a table wearing full French pirate regalia. We are talking Barbossa level dressed up.
Okay.
So he's got the whole kit kind of thing. And he's sitting back there smoking a cigar, looking like he hates each and every one of us. He is utterly unimpressed with the modern world, and when you try to talk to him, he evaporates. Now, these are fairly simple apparition stories, but what make them interesting is those two stories are listed in folklore books from the 1880s as well as the tour guide manual from 1903. Those stories in those books are listed at over 100 years old. So these are two of the oldest ghost stories that are still actively being reported in the city of New Orleans. Now, we do have some new ones though, guys. And my favorite new one is that people will be standing in line for the girls' bathroom. Gentleman in pirate clothes comes up behind you and starts talking to you. Generally, it's super flirty things. Hey, how you doing? What, you got any big plans for today? This, honestly, it's the pickup lines every local boy uses to pick up tourists. When the ladies try to point him out to her friends, he's disappeared just like that. Now, I used to tell you guys these stories before I sent you off into the bar. And then one night I told that story and I had a girl start screaming. Oh, God. Turns out she had seen that specific spirit the night before. And we got her calmed down. We got her calmed down. We got the tour finished. And from that day forward, I told these stories after I sent you guys off to the bar. The thought process here that I had was that if you didn't know what to expect, you'd be more likely to see it. Turns out I wasn't wrong. Wow. 3 times in the year and a half that I've been doing things this way, I have had girls on my tour see that specific spirit. Now, the first two who saw it, they started screaming just like the initial lady did. But my favorite got added to my tour, and it was in March of this year. Had a group about this size. It's a lot of people. You can't interact with all of them. And I had these two girls. I'm going to say they could not have been older than 21 years old, and I only give them 21 because they were drinking, and it's not my job to card you guys. So they stood in the very back, and they were drinking, and they didn't interact with any of the other customers. They did not interact with me. They just stood in the back and were quiet, looking scared. And that was it. That's what they did. And I was like, all right, that's fine. And we sent everybody else off, and then everybody comes back, and I told that specific story. And this little teeny tiny girl who had not said a word shoved her way all the way through the front of the crowd, got right in my face and said, "You're crapping me, right?" Only that's not what she said. She was a little more vulgar. That being said, guys, I told her no. Actually, I'm not joking. I've had 3 people on my tour who swear up, down, and sideways they've seen that ghost. And normally they start screaming, but you have my undivided attention. Tell me what happened. She stared at her feet and refused to talk to me. But her friend in the back said everything I needed to know, because her friend in the back said, "You with the funny face, tell me what happened." And she said, "Well, we were standing in line for the girls' bathroom." And she said, "Oh my God, why is there a guy in pirate clothes standing behind us in line for the girls' bathroom?" And I said, "Where?" And she said, "Oh my God, he was there just a second ago." And I told her she'd been drinking too much. At which point the little girl who had seen the spirit turned around and screamed at her friend, "I told you he was real, and it was glorious." As a tour guide, that's the holy grail. That's what I want to see every single day, every night. If I did that, I would die happy. But unfortunately, I have not figured out a way to make them perform on command. That being said, I am just happy I have a place that people do regularly see spirits on the tour. And if you happen to be one of those people who just want to see a ghost in New Orleans, I do have recommendations for you. And the first one is Lafitte's Blacksmith shop. There are all kinds of apparitions in there, as well as New Orleans, what I consider standard haunting. Most people aren't used to their wine glasses moving on their own, so that's generally a pretty good thing for people. The other place that I recommend is Pirates Alley. Probably more ghosts per square foot than any other area in the entire city. All right, guys, let's move on. Welcome to the original mortuary for the city of New Orleans, which is this building right here. Now, this place played an important part in the history of New Orleans when it came to the yellow fever epidemics. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of our zombie myths down here actually come from the yellow fever disease. It has to do with the way that the disease presents itself. When you get yellow fever, it's like you get the flu for a couple of days, 2-3 days, and then out of nowhere, or you start getting better for 24 to 36 hours, then out of nowhere, fever spikes through the roof, you go into a renal failure, hence the yellow and yellow fever, you're jaundiced. then you have suppressed respiratory output, you have suppressed cardiac output, i.e. you can have as few as 4 breaths per minute, and it's really hard to tell that you have a pulse because your heart isn't beating real hard, and then you slip into a coma. The only difference between the people who live through yellow fever and those who die from the disease are whether or not they wake up from the coma. Everybody goes through the symptoms. Now, unfortunately, in the 1720s and 1730s, the French had not had a whole lot of experience with tropical diseases. They had no clue what was going on, and you have to remember that these diseases happen, the outbreaks happened in the summer. And when you have somebody who dies in a place like southern Louisiana, you want to put them in the ground as fast as humanly possible because corpses don't deal well with this humidity and with this heat. So, unfortunately, there were mistakes that were made. You have to remember, if you're sitting there in the 1720s and the 1730s and you have a loved one who got a summer flu, okay, whatever, they start getting better, cool. Then out of nowhere, they have a really high fever, they're delirious, they start turning funny colors, they're not breathing, they don't have a pulse, and they're non-responsive. That looked like dead. And into the ground that they went. Because people also forget that we didn't have above ground tombs until 1789. That was the very first time we started doing the European style tombs. Up until that point, we buried first in the high ground and then in the city cemetery. And the high ground, guys, is the Mississippi River banks. Now, at that time, we did not have enhanced levees, and the river flooded at least twice a year. And whenever the Mississippi River floods, it washes out its riverbanks and everything that's inside them. So when you start hearing stories about coffins floating down Decatur, some people will tell you that didn't happen, and during floods, necessarily it didn't. But in the early days of the colony, while they were still burying people in the riverbanks, it absolutely did. And that being said, that's how they found out that people were being buried alive. You can't just leave the coffins that washed out when we had the spring floods. You got to pick them back up and bury them again. And they noticed that some of them, people had obviously been trying to get out. Now, you'll start hearing a zombie myths, but a lot of people down here realized that they were mistaking people being dead when they weren't. And there was actually a realization that that was happening. It wasn't all just folklore. And one of the things that they did was they instituted basically a precursor to the death certificate. They made a rule that said that you couldn't bury your loved one in the ground until a medical examiner had taken a look at them and declared them dead. All of those medical professionals were located in this building. Now, during the yellow fever outbreaks, it worked really well for this. You would bring your loved ones in, they would say, "Yea, verily, this one has died." They would line the bodies out here on the street, and every so often a wagon driver would come by, pick up all those bodies, and take them to mass graves at the edge of town. They said, "Nope, this one was still alive." They took you down to the building that is now currently the Homer Plessy Elementary School, which is that big red brick building that we passed on the way over here. And they left you there. If you woke up, great, you went home. If not, you went out on the street, same process. Now, this actually worked really well for every year but one. Of course, that's the year I'm going to tell you about. The year was 1853. In 1853, we had a horrible yellow fever outbreak. Ended up having an 80% mortality rate. We lost 7,800 citizens in under 2 weeks. And the real problem there was we lost all of our medical professionals and almost all of our wagon drivers in the first 3 days. This was a major problem. Anybody who had any kind of medical experience was dead. They still wanted people to declare people dead, but we didn't have anybody who actually knew how. So we had members of the clergy, members of the public take positions over here, and their way of declaring people dead was to take a mirror, a piece of glass, and stick it up under your nose. If it fogs up, you're alive. Down to Homer Plessy you go. If it doesn't fog up, you're dead. And now you go out onto the pile of bodies, because we don't have wagon drivers, is now 5 to 7 bodies deep, stretches 3.5 blocks past Bourbon Street.
Oh my God.
Now, unfortunately, there's some real problems with this, and there were some serious mistakes that were made because we're having hundreds to thousands of people come through this office every single day with untrained professionals, and we have victims who are breathing as little as 4 breaths per minute. When you boil that down, those aren't good odds, and people people wound up on the wrong side of those odds too, and there were mistakes that were made. Of those lucky 20% that survived that epidemic, but weren't so lucky that they breathed when they stuck the glass under their nose, of those, if you were lucky, you woke up on top of the pile. That point, you had a fairly serious case of PTSD, but physically, you were going to be fine. And on top of that, if you survive yellow fever, you'll never catch it again. You're immune. But unfortunately, not everybody can be lucky. And of those who were not lucky, do you think I can't see you? Do you think I can't see you? So,
We can see you.
no. Unfortunately, like I said, not everybody can be lucky, and there were people who woke up in the middle to the bottom of the pile.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
No.
From those people, we have reports of every imaginable broken bone. We have reports of suffocation. We have reports of compartmentalized syndrome, which is basically where a piece of your body is pressed down to the point that it does not allow for circulation, causes the tissues and the blood to start off gas, become toxic and septic. You start screaming because you wake up in a pile of dead bodies. Somebody pulls you out, but it releases the pressure that's been holding all of that toxic and septic material in place, allowing it to circulate throughout your system, and you die of blood poisoning. Yay! No, that's not the worst thing that happened. Worst thing that happened is this particular epidemic happened in late June.
Oh.
Late June in New Orleans, you're looking at 96 degrees in the shade, 100% humidity at night.
Oh, God.
No.
There's bodies that have been out here for a week and a half. No. And there were people who woke up in the middle to the bottom of those piles. They start struggling to get out. And the fact of the matter is, corpses in those conditions, what they do is they blow up like a balloon, and eventually they find a weak spot and they pop. Now, everybody thinks that that's a huge explosion, right?
No,
it's not.
It's not.
It's a pinpoint prick that allows gas to escape. Now, I wouldn't want to be in front of it. That would be gross. But that being said, the second that gas is allowed to escape, it's like letting gas out of a balloon. The body melts like candle wax, and it liquefies. And there were reports of people who disturbed the bodies of the people above them trying to get out, who drowned on the bodily fluids of the people above them before they could be saved. Take that with you when you go get cafe au lait and beignets here in a little bit. That is a gift from my husband to you guys. He is a former paramedic, and his favorite thing to do in the world is to gross people out. That being said, guys, this is another place you can stay. This is a satellite building for the Chateau Hotel just down the road, and it is what I like to call New Orleans Standard Haunted Plus. As far as the New Orleans Standard hauntings go, I have heard reports of people who laid out their suitcase on their bed to go take a shower. They go take their shower, they come back in, and everything that was in their suitcase is now all over their rooms.
What?
They report their bureau drawers slamming. They report their lights turning on and off. They report hearing footsteps. But what gets them a plus categorization is I've had people tell me, and more than one, that they are seeing what looks like something breathing on the glass in their hotel rooms. I have a real problem with this, guys. There's in folklore,
I know
there is a limit to what the dead can do. The dead do not breathe, not even in folklore. Breathing is reserved for the living. And the second that you have something invisible that is breathing, you have moved out of the realm of ghosts and into the realm of monsters, and I am out. I'm a ghost hunter, I'm not a monster hunter, and if you guys want to deal with that, I wish you luck.
Yeah, no.
All right, guys, welcome to the last stop on the tour, and the Ursuline Convent, which is this location right here. Now, this is the oldest building in the Mississippi River Valley, regardless of if you take into account the claims of Lafitte's Blacksmith shop. We can prove that the original building here was built in 1727. Now, the dependency you see here and the church you see over here are later additions. The dependency was built in 1845. The church, St. Mary's, was built between 1829 and 1845. The main building, though, if you look at that and think, man, that is an awful big building for 9 years into the colony, you are absolutely correct. What you are looking at is a remodel from 1745 to 1753. The only part of the original building that still exists is the center staircase, dead center of the building. But even regardless, the earliest documented building, even with the and the renovations is 1753. So it still gets the title. Now this building, the original one in 1727, was built to house the Ursuline nuns and their attached girls' school. This was our second attempt at bringing wives to the citizens of New Orleans. After the whole prostitute thing didn't work out, they decided that maybe it would be better if we brought in girls and actually raised them to be the wives to these gentlemen. Now, I will say, historically speaking, it did kind of work. Not all of them became prostitutes. Now, the first group of girls arrived down here in 1729. Intrigue started immediately. First thing that happened was that the nuns didn't tell anybody that the girls had made it. They waited until night and brought the girls into the convent under the cover of darkness. And there's going to be people who tell you that the nuns were up to something nefarious and the priest knew something was wrong. But the bottom line is, these guys had also gotten word that the girls were on their way and they had taken to hanging out around the convent to quote unquote catch a glimpse of the girls when they got here. And knowing who these guys were, probably the best that we could hope for, and the nuns knew that. They were just trying to keep those kids safe. There was nothing nefarious about it. Now, that being said, the next day was a whole lot harder to explain away. Because these girls, they didn't volunteer to be down here any more than anybody else did. Nobody wanted to send their daughters to New Orleans to marry criminals. So the government went around to orphanages and to the prisons, and they found girls who didn't have guardians. They named them the king's daughters. They gave them a small dowry. They put them in the care of the Ursuline nuns, and they told these kids that you are going to New Orleans, you are going to be these guys' wives, this is your life. Now, their little dowries were put into small boxes that were called cassettes, and it's spelled C-A-S-Q-U-E-T-T-E, and our very English-speaking people down here pronounce that casket. So a lot of times you will hear that these first group of girls called the casket girls. It's not creepy. Everybody went, oh my gosh, they brought their own caskets. No, it's the name of the box. It's kind of like calling them backpack girls. No, it's not creepy at all. That being said, guys, that doesn't explain away what actually happened. Because they were told that if they had anything from their previous life that they wanted to keep, they were welcome to keep it, so long as it fit inside this little box. But that's all they got. So the next morning, they started unloading these boxes off of the strip. Okay, she is talking. That's fine. I'm like, whoa, what am I hearing? Okay, they started unloading the boxes off of the ship, and as they were coming down the road, everybody noticed. At this point, the cat was out of the bag. People knew that these girls were here. They started coming out to see the sights. And as those boxes started coming down the road and they hit the potholes that were there even in 1729, they could not help but notice that there were large clumps of dirt falling out of some of these boxes. Now, you know a little bit about how they got their dowries and what was in those boxes. Why choose dirt? Now we sit here in the 21st century going, well, I don't know, maybe they wanted to be buried in the dirt that they were born in. Maybe it's horticulture, maybe, traditional plants, maybe something like that. But it's not today. This happened in 1729, and when these guys saw those clumps of dirt falling out of the boxes, they took 2 steps back and said, oh my Lord, they sent us vampires. Bless you, I don't know, I didn't see or hear who left, but everybody who laughed, bless you, you make me feel better about myself, because when I first heard that, that's what I did. Now, I had to stop and I had to be why that happened and what was going on. And I will tell you this, it does make sense, guys. But you got to take off the 21st century goggles and grab your 18th century goggles. And remember, Bram Stoker's Dracula isn't going to be published until 1887. We're not going to be introduced to the idea of a gentleman vampire in this country until the 20th century. Before that, all of our vampires basically came out of Eastern Europe. And what you forget a lot of times is that when these guys were coming over to settle down here in the French colonies, the Catholic Church was still doing witch hunts. But they had moved in France from doing witch hunts into doing vampire hunts. It was actively going on in this time period. And what the Catholic Church was hunting for was more or less the Romanian strigoi type of Eastern European vampire. The closest thing we have today that even resembles it is the Nosferatu. The way that this particular type of vampire works is it's a type of demonic possession. Demon comes in, takes over your body. so you're not just going to deteriorate. But the skin's going to start to pull back from your teeth. You're going to have it pulling back from your eyes. Your fingers are going to look like they've elongated. And if it's been in there long enough, what you're going to have is a creature that has bulging eyes, sunken cheekbones, pointed ears, visible muscle structure, elongated hands. But the first thing you're going to notice is that the demon does do one thing to you. Needs to eat. You're going to lose your pearly whites. And they're going to be replaced with rows of sharp teeth. Because the way that this particular type of vampire eats is it rips out your throat and it sucks the blood out of your exposed neck. There's no two fangs. There's not the little sexy necky thing going on. There's nobody that's handsome or charming. These things are monsters. And it just so happens that one of the myths that surrounds this particular type of vampire is that it cannot cross any body of moving water unless it's in the dirt that it was created in. So why did they bring dirt? Because they had to. The Atlantic Ocean is an awfully big body of moving water. Now, legend says that the priests and the nuns had no idea that there were vampires among that first group of girls, and they actually found out because of a nosy nun. Now, the nun wanted to know what the girls had been given in their dowries. Dowries were stored on the 3rd floor of the Ursuline Convent. She put the girls to bed, marched upstairs, started popping open those boxes to see what the girls had got, and 3 of those boxes contained nothing but a thin layer of dirt. And she put 2 and 2 together and said, "Oh my Lord, they sent us vampires," and went and got the priests. Priest agreed with her, and they ended up sealing the shutters on the 3rd floor with silver nails, silver screws, and silver chains. And then the nun was left to see if the vampires came back. They did. Just before dawn, the vampires burst through the shutters as if there had been no holy blessings there at all, then disappeared back out into the city just before the dawn. And from that day forward, nobody was allowed on the 3rd floor of the Ursuline Convent. Now that's the legend, guys. Take it or leave it. And I will tell you, I know I told some of you I'm not originally from here. I am originally from Texas, and we came in here just after Katrina, and it was a little rough. And I had a lot of friends who were natives down here, and they were giving us tips and tricks on how not to die in the city. And I'm going to tell you right now, there are still tips and tricks on how not to die in New Orleans. That's real. Now, among the many and myriad very logical things that they told us about neighborhood boundaries and neutral grounds and all that kind of good stuff, one of the things that he told me was more or less, stay away from this area because more or less here there be vampires. Wait, what? What you mean here there be vampires? You're talking like real vampires like Lestat and stuff, and they're like, no, I mean like the Nosferatu. So I asked the story and I got told it just like you did. And just like you did, I started laughing. Said, man, you're telling me there's a Strigoi in New Orleans. That's what you're saying. He said, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that they come around and I'm saying people die. That's exactly what I'm saying. And you believe this. I said, man, my family's been here for 250 years. Yes, I believe this. I know this. And I'm telling you this, trying to keep you alive in my city. I said, I love you, Josh. You are my favorite people on the planet. But even as a folklorist, even as somebody who has a degree in history with a specialization in oral history and folklore, these kinds of stories are my life. I'm not buying it, man. I can't believe this. That's ridiculous. And his response to me was, you know what? That's fine. You're an adult. It's your funeral. You believe it or don't. I don't really care. You can't say I didn't tell you. And I will tell you right now, I didn't think about it again until 2014. And in 2014, there were a series of things that happened that made me reconsider this story. Made me reconsider everything I thought about this story. And I'm not going to pass any judgments on you. I'm just going to tell you what happened from my perspective. Early in 2014, I've already told you about Josh telling me about the story. Early 2014, I had a friend who moved down here from New York City. Now this guy, when he moved down here, he's 50-year-old, great big old New York biker. Got a job down here as a bartender at Napoleon House, and I was super happy for him. He was doing well. Him and his wife were doing good, and he was making good money. And I went down to have lunch with him at least once a week, and we talked about the paranormal because he was my favorite paranormal sparring partner because he didn't believe in it at all. He challenged me early on and said that anything that I claimed was caused by the paranormal he could prove was actually caused by human stupidity or drug use. Right now. I lost all of those arguments. It's a good argument. Now, I went down one day to have my weekly beat down, and the guy was gone. And I called his wife to see what was going on. She said he quit his job, went to a new place, and I went down there and asked him if he was crazy, because this was a dive bar he was not going to make any money at. He's going to starve to death. You lost your ever-loving mind. What are you doing? Why would you quit a perfectly good job for a dump like this? He said, man, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. And then he looked back at me and said, you know, of all people, you might. Sit down. All right. So he said what had happened was that he was closing up one night and he heard something out in the bar area, out in the main bar area. He went to go check it out, and there was a little girl up on top of the bar. Had short, dark, curly hair, was wearing an old-fashioned nightgown, did not have shoes on. She was dancing between the bottles and the glasses up on top of the bar. And he screamed at the kid, get out. Said the kid whipped around on all fours, hissed at him with a mouthful of shark teeth, and started advancing on him. He said, I don't know what that was, but it was definitely a predator. And I did what you do with predators. I maintained eye contact. I backed out of the room. I waited for the doors to close in front of me, and then I ran like my life depended on it. And you quit your job? Yes, I quit my job, and I left my wallet and my jacket and everything else was sitting in that room. Doors were open. All that money. Anybody wants to go in there, they can, but I ain't gonna. See, everything in that building can be replaced. I can't. I'm not gonna lie. He told me that, and I stopped for a minute, and I started laughing. He's like, what are you doing? Don't laugh at me. I'm deadly serious. I told my wife, I told my boss, this is not a freaking joke. I said, man, you got me good here. You had me going for a minute. That's a pretty good creepy story. I like it. That definitely adds to the creep factor here in New Orleans. He's like, I'm not joking. I'm serious. It happened. I'm like, okay, of course it did, sweetheart. And he was mad. Understandably, he was mad at me. And I went in, I thought, man, he's getting good at this. He's playing with the folklore thing. He's getting me going. I like it. And then 6 weeks later, people started dying, and that's not a joke. March 2014. We lost 3 people here in the city in a little under a month's time. All of them found floating in the Mississippi River with their throats ripped out. All of them were gutter punks. Now, if you don't know what gutter punks are, they're non-traditional homeless people, generally younger in variety, 18 to 35 years old. You've seen them whether you realize it or not. Generally, kind of grungy, kind of dirty, always have big backpacks, hang out over in this area. Yeah. Among them, the guy I threatened to spray ketchup on over in front of LaLaurie, gutter punk. Now, most of them are creatives, and they're actually some of the more interesting people here in town. But unfortunately, they're also some of the most vulnerable. And like I said, in 2014, they started going missing, and then they were found, and it wasn't cute at all. See, their original place where they actually set up camp is about 2 blocks from here, and that's where they went missing from. Now, I knew, and I still know a lot of them. And when all this was going down and everybody was being questioned, the gutter punks were sitting there talking. The police told them that it was a serial killer among the train kids. And they argued with that. They said that absolutely could not be one of them because train kids don't just come into town and stay in one place. They jump trains and go from city to city to city to city. That's the point of being a train kid. And if that were true, it would be happening elsewhere, but it's not. Only happens here. This isn't the first time it's happened. It has actually happened several times before. Now, in addition to that, they said the girls were sitting there talking, and one of my friends asked me, how about you explain this to me? What is the physics behind killing a human being to the point that the police say it says that it appears to be an animal attack, but they attribute it to human beings? And beyond that, how about you explain to me when the last time you heard the modus operandi of a serial killer being ripping somebody's throat out? None of this makes any sense. In fact, it'd make more sense that it'd be a monster than it would be for one of us to be killing him. Now, they got stuck on this idea, and they started talking about rougarous. If you don't know what a rougarou is, rougarous are swamp werewolves. And they got the idea that maybe it could be a swamp werewolf coming in and ripping out these kids' throats, and how there was all kinds of monsters in southern Louisiana that would attribute for this kind of attack that don't account for it just being a serial killer. And at that point, I politely picked up my stuff and I removed myself. I went ahead and went home, but not because I thought they were crazy or talking smack. It's because I thought they were wrong. That made me feel crazy. Because they were absolutely right. We have a ton of monsters down here in southern Louisiana that would account for exactly the kind of thing that was happening in real life. But you don't gotta look all the way out in the swamps to find them. All you gotta do is look right there. Like I said, that's 2 blocks from where those kids got pulled off of. And they're talking about this, and all I can think is, this can't be happening. Because 6 weeks ago, I had a friend who swears they saw exactly what my friend Josh described about 8 years ago as being out there that came around every once in a while and killed people. And then these people really did go missing 2 blocks from the Ursuline Convent, and all of a sudden, none of this was funny. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. I can tell you that at that point in time, and to this day, I no longer park my car down here. I do not walk in this area by myself, and I will never laugh at somebody when they say they see a monster ever again. And I'm going to leave you guys with the same piece of advice that I was given when I got down here. Same caveat too. You don't have to believe. You're all adults here. Piece of advice that I was given. If you ever see the shutters on the 3rd floor of the Ursuline Convent open, strongly suggest you turn around and go the other direction, because legend says that's when the vampires are out hunting. Even if you don't believe that, guys, I can promise you this. If you ever see those shutters open, you will not find a local within blocks to help you should something go wrong. Now, with that, I want to thank you guys for joining me this evening. Y'all have been absolutely wonderful. Y'all have been a joy to give a tour to. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
And there are actually a couple of things you guys can do for me. Number 1, actually the most important. Please take 5 minutes out of your time when you get home, when you get back to your hotel room, and write a review. If you don't know what to say, I'd be more than happy to help you out. Real simple. Click 5 stars, say, I had fun. Now, if you want to do more than that, I'm thrilled. But really and truly, if you have trouble thinking about it, that is enough. And last but not least, if you guys have any complaints or concerns about the tour tonight or about your experience tonight, please feel free to write that down on a $20 bill, and I will make sure you i.e. tipping is appreciated. Thank you. If I could please, last but not least, if I can please get you to remove your stickers, fold them sticky side to sticky side, and hand them back to me, I would greatly appreciate it. They try to get you with the blocking the sidewalk, they get me with those stickers, and that's where I get my fines. All right, guys. Does everybody know where